Hello, Cloud and Bridge kids. Happy Easter. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
So you'll hear that a lot when you go to church on Easter, right? Where it's kind of a call and response. The pastor will say he is risen, and all the grown-ups say he is risen indeed. It's a tradition in most churches to do that on Easter Sunday because we're celebrating Christ's resurrection. So you guys will have an actual Easter Sunday video that will be made by all the grown-ups at Cloud and Bridge. But I wanted you to have a kid one too. So this is Saturday. It's not quite the right day, but we're making one anyway. So I'm going to read to you from the Gospel of Matthew an account of the stuff that happens after that, and we'll kind of stop and talk about each thing. Okay? Sound good? But we're going to start right after Jesus' death. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus, and then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph of Arimathea was actually one of the Pharisees. So he was a very important and learned man who knew a lot about the Jewish religion, was considered to be a really good man, had a lot of money and a lot of importance. But he was also a follower of Jesus. So when he goes to Pilate and says, "Would you please give me Jesus' body?" Pilate wants those people to think he's important and to listen to him, so he gives it to him. Okay, but he wants to honor Jesus, so he actually asks for Jesus' body so that he can honor him with the proper burial. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and he laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. And Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb. So I know you guys remember the 12 disciples that Jesus has, right? Like Peter and John and Judas, unfortunately, and all of them. But there, of course, were a lot of other followers of Jesus as well. A lot of other disciples, disciples with a little d, right? Jesus's followers of all kinds. And a lot of them were women as well, right? So we already knew some of his friends, Lazarus and Mary and Martha, right? And then also, of course, Mary Magdalene, who's told about the other parts of the Gospels. His mother, Mary, just a lot of actual women that were his followers as well. Also believed he was the Messiah, also supported his ministry, all of those things. And so some of them are actually watching as they bury him. And they're watching for a very important reason. They actually want to go and prepare Jesus's body for burial. And this is an important thing that they did there. We don't think about it as much now, because even though our bodies are prepared for burial as well in our culture, it's done usually by businesses, by funeral homes and stuff like that. We don't do it, so we don't think about it. We do like embalming and things like that before we bury people. In that time, what they would do is they would actually put spices and oils on the body and wrap it up in these bandages before they buried it. And it was a way of honoring the dead, saying, "I love you," all that kind of stuff, and making it a little less stinky and gross was the idea. And they wanted to do that for Jesus. So they wanted to see where they bury him. But they don't go in right away and start doing this. Why? Well, because it was Friday night. And so Friday night is the start of Sabbath. So if you remember, we celebrate our holy day on Sundays, right? That's when Christians go to church. We do all that. And the reason we do that is because that's the day Christ rose from the dead. That's Easter Sunday, right? But of course, the Jewish holy day was the Sabbath. And so they always stopped everything Friday nights into Saturday, all the way up to like Saturday sunrise. And so they didn't do anything you weren't supposed to do, any work, all this kind of stuff. So these were good women, followers of God, followers of Jesus. They weren't going to work on the Sabbath. And so they take note of where Jesus's body is, and then they go away and they wait. And that must have been really the worst day, right? Because we have Good Friday, which we celebrated, or at least mourned and thought about, right, yesterday. And then we have Easter Sunday, which is such a joyous resurrection day. But right in the middle is that Saturday where they had no clue what was happening. And everyone's just sitting there thinking, was it all a lie? Was he really the Messiah? What's happening? What's going on? Lord, what do we do? Right? I mean, it's got to have been so scary and so weird. But Matthew tells us one interesting thing that did happen on that Saturday that I think is really interesting. And this is the next part of the passage. The next day, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate. So they went back to that guy that did like all the big trial, there we go, of Jesus and all that kind of stuff, the big important Roman guy. So they all went back to him and they said, "Sir, we remember how that imposter," they mean Jesus, "said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I will rise.'" So Jesus had been telling people what was going to happen. And he didn't say it exactly, and nobody really understood what he was saying, but he was telling people that he was going to rise from the dead. And they remember that. The Pharisees really were listening, even if they didn't believe it. But they remember Jesus saying it. "Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the third day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he has risen from the dead, and the last fraud will be worse than the first." So they're actually worried about people telling, or about the disciples telling people that Jesus had risen from the dead. Now, they didn't believe that Jesus was going to, right? They didn't believe in him at all, but they thought that the disciples would steal his body and try to do that. So they want to prevent that. They're really worried about that. So Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Roman guard of soldiers, so well-armed, serious soldiers. Go and make it as secure as you can. So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. So they go and they take that big stone that's been rolled in front of the tomb and they seal it up so you can tell if it's been moved, and they post guards right by it and all this kind of stuff. And the whole idea is that they're trying to prevent the disciples from pulling this trick on people because they're really worried about that. Because what they really wanted was people to stop believing in Jesus, right? They want their version of things to be the correct one and one that everybody listens to. And so they're really worried about all of this. But I think that's interesting because I think all they did was make it more obvious that a miracle happened later, because it would have been so hard to steal Jesus's body, right? And so all their efforts to try and downplay this actually make us more and more sure about the miracle that did happen. So then Sabbath is over, right? Saturday night happens, everybody goes to sleep. Sunday morning, the women are ready, and they go really early actually, and they come and they're ready to go, and anoint Jesus's body. And I got to tell you, after a day, I would have been a little bit worried. It was a little bit stinky, but they are ready because they loved Jesus and they wanted to do this one last thing for him. So they are ready to go. And this is the next part of our Bible passage. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. So there's this big appearance of these angels, and those guards that the Pharisees and chief priests and everybody had asked to be placed there actually just faint, right? Because it's so scary and so weird. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Go and see the place where he lay, and then quickly go and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you." So the angel has this message for him, and it's a very famous passage, what I just read you. There's actually a very famous Easter hymn that does that. So it goes, "Hear the bells ringing, they're singing that we can be born again. Hear the bells ringing, they're singing, Jesus is risen from the dead. The angel up on the tombstone said he is risen just as he said." Ooh, I sang that wrong. "Quickly now go tell his disciples that Jesus Christ is no longer dead. Joy to the world, he is risen. Hallelujah," etc., etc. It's a really fun Easter song. So if you ever hear that song, it comes right out of Matthew. It's a very famous Easter hymn. So the angel gives the message to these women, right? Go tell his disciples that he's not dead. So they quickly departed from the tomb with fear and great joy. So they're excited and they're also really scared. And they ran to tell his disciples. And it's interesting because it doesn't tell us here, but in John and Luke, we hear a little bit more of what happened with the disciples. And it tells us that John and Peter came after the women later, and they look in the tomb and they see that it's empty, but they don't quite believe the women at first, right? Because it's a crazy thing to believe, let's be honest, right? And then in John's gospel, it tells us a little bit more about Mary Magdalene coming back and all this. And this one just kind of puts them all together, and it says, "And behold, Jesus met them." So either right after they tell the disciples or right as they're going to tell the disciples, Jesus meets them and says, "Greetings." And they came up and they took a hold of him, his feet, and worshiped him. And then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." So he gives them the same message, telling the disciples to go to Galilee. And the reason I wanted to tell you this part of the story of Jesus' resurrection, because I wanted you to celebrate Easter and know about Jesus' resurrection, is this echoes a lot of what we've seen, though, in all of the other things that we've learned in the Gospels. Jesus keeps appearing to those people that were often forgotten by the world. The shepherds, who were not important, are the very first people to come and worship him at his birth. And then he includes Gentiles. They're king Gentiles, they're important astronomers, but not people that Jewish people would have thought were good people. And Jesus consistently notices the people that other people have forgotten or thought could become good followers of God. The Samaritan woman at the well, the widow's mite, right? And he keeps telling us the same thing, to not seek to be really important in the way that the world sees things, but instead to try and follow him and to get our importance from him and to know that he loves all of those people. And the thing is that the women were not the most important of Jesus's followers. Jewish women at the time had more importance and more roles and stuff than, say, Roman women of the time did, right? But it still wasn't like today. If they had been in a Roman court of law, those women who said that Jesus rose from the dead, nobody would have believed them because they were women. right? Their word would not have been important, but they are still important to God. And right at this point where the disciples are all still a little bit confused, he tells them to go to Galilee, but they're all still a little doubtful. If you read the other gospels, they sort of believe the women, sort of don't. They're not sure what's going on. And then there's this really entertaining story where a couple of Jesus's other followers, not part of the 12, but other disciples of Jesus, are walking on this road to Emmaus. It's another town. And they meet a man and they start talking with him, and they're telling him all about, did you hear this crazy thing? Jesus was crucified and we don't know what's going on. We don't know what to think. We don't know what to believe. And then they go and they sit down to have dinner, and they look at him and they're, oh, wait, you're Jesus. And then he goes away. It's like the weirdest story. So all of the disciples are very confused. They don't know what to do. And they don't see Jesus for a little bit, right? Until they go to Galilee and they all meet together and then Jesus appears to them. But Jesus takes this time to go and see these followers of his, these women, because he loves them and because they're important to him. And he's rewarding them for that faithfulness, right? Right when the disciples are sitting there all upset and worried on Saturday, they don't know what's going on. They're questioning God, like, why did this happen? You know, what is going to happen now, Lord? Was everything false? Those women still go to prepare Christ's body for burial because they still loved Jesus and they wanted to do this one last act of worship, this one last act of adoration. And because of that, Jesus says, I'm going to come see you. I'm going to tell you I'm alive. I'm going to let you know that I love you and you are my followers and you are important. And I think that's really important for you guys as kids, because people sometimes discount kids' faith and they discount the things that kids say because you guys are goofy and silly and children. But it is still important. And Jesus wants all of you as his followers as well, right? He did at the very beginning. He had said, let the little children come to me and all that. But he also wants you to know that no matter who you are important to Christ. And he wants you to come and follow him and to declare who he is, to declare his resurrection and to go tell everybody else about him. He likes knowing that you are declaring him as Lord. And you're important to him and your faith is important to him, right? Even to the point of putting people that nobody else thought was important in the Bible so that we would all know that they were his true followers, right? So go have a lovely Easter with your family. Say goodbye to Mr. Bunny. It's actually Eliana behind the chair. I'm sure you knew. But I hope you have a wonderful Easter. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.